Richard Arnold. I grew up here in Lynchburg from about the age of 2, and Lynchburg was a friendly town overall. There were some issues as far as integration in the 60s and 70s when they started to push for integration. There was some backlash as far as folks who felt that segregation was the norm, was the accepted norm, and also was probably the way things were just supposed to be, because that's the way they always were. And I know there were, like when they went to integrate, there were 2 public swimming pools in town, one in Miller Park and one in Riverside Park. And they were, of course, segregated, and the blacks were not allowed in the pool or in the park either, especially not in the pool. And when some of the activists came out to the Miller Park pool to enjoy the facilities there, the folks running the pool didn't want to let them in. So they called, I remember the mayor actually came out, and they called the mayor, and the mayor told the black folks there that they couldn't keep them out of the pool, but what they could do is shut the pool down, then nobody could swim. And that's exactly what they did. So both of the pools got closed. They filled them up with dirt, and it was the biggest eyesore you ever saw for years in both of the parks. I thought it was just incredibly stupid. And instead of letting the black folks in, they decided to shut it down, and then nobody could use it. And they created this huge eyesore, like in the middle of the park. There's this big filled-in swimming pool, and it sat there for years and years. The whole time I was growing up, in the late '60s or early '70s, and it's only been recently in Riverside. It was still just a filled-in pool up until very recently. I think they've actually opened a water park there now, but that's just been in the last year or so. In Miller Park, at one point, after being an eyesore for about 30 years, they turned it into a petting zoo for a while, and eventually they built another pool over there that is integrated, and I've never swam in it, but my daughter growing up, she used to go there all the time with her friends, and I've never heard about there being any trouble there, or there's never been any problems there with that. But whenever I saw those filled-in swimming pools, I always thought, well, that's a testament to stupidity. Just the fact that we'd rather create an eyesore and not let anybody enjoy the pool than to let it be integrated. But I went to when I was in school, in elementary school especially, was pretty much segregated. I think when in elementary school there'd be like one black student, and where I went to school was all white school with maybe one black person. And when I was in the 5th grade, we moved from the Miller Park area to Rivermont, and I started going to Armstrong, which at one time had been an all-black elementary school. So I went from being in a all-white school to being one of the few white students in a mostly black school. The principal was black, and a lot of the teachers were black. Most of the students were black. And being the new kid in school, because we moved about halfway through my 5th grade year, and I never had any trouble with the black students. There was like 2 other white boys in the class, and they're the ones I had problems with, interestingly enough. But you know, but I remember as a kid, you know, hearing my family talk about, you know, when integration first started, you know, they did have a problem with it, and they would, you know, make references to it and whatnot. I never knew what the problem was. I mean, I never understood it, and I don't think that my family really understood me, you know, for feeling that way. But I think what's happening with that is, you know, we're becoming a more integrated society, which I think is a great thing. I think it's inevitable and necessary. And I'm glad that we don't have that as much now as we did in the past, as far as prejudice and whatnot. Yeah, well, at Armstrong, in the 5th grade, there was like 2 other white kids in the class, and they're the ones that I would have trouble with. And I think it was just the fact that I was the new kid in the class more than anything else, but they didn't seem to have a problem with anybody else. But it was a little bit of a culture shock for me, you know, going from an all-white school to a primarily black school. But I figured out pretty quickly that, you know, people are just people. You know, they're just the same as anybody else. I mean, you know, it wasn't a big deal for me. You know, my mom would tell me, you know, don't like bring your black friends home. And I'm like, why not? And the thing of it was, for her, you know, it just wasn't an accepted practice. I think it just wasn't the norm. And you know, because like with my daughter, you know, years later, after I was grown and had a daughter, she was growing up, and of course by then everything was integrated. All the schools and everything were totally integrated, and she would bring black friends home, and even to my mom's apartment. And my mom never had a problem with it. So I think that instead of just being, for her, it wasn't so much prejudice as just the fact that that was the accepted, you know, custom of that time. It was just considered, you know, it just wasn't done that way. And then years later, when my daughter was growing up, it was the accepted norm that it was done that way. Because by then, kids, you know, they started going to nursery school together. You know, nursery school is integrated, kindergarten's integrated. You know, they grow up together, and they forget. I mean, it becomes such a non-issue that it just becomes a physical characteristic more than anything else. You know. Yeah, I think that you know, I don't know that my mom would have felt the pressure from her colleagues or whatever, you know, if we brought a black friend home. I think, like, I know my aunts and my grandmother, I mean, they were, you know, they were much more prejudiced than, say, my mother. And I think that kind of lessens over. It just seems like the further away you get in time, or the further back you go, it's more ingrained in people. You know, it's like my grandmother would have been more prejudiced than my mother. You know, my mother would be less prejudiced than my grandmother. I would be less prejudiced. You know, my daughter would be less prejudiced than me, and on and on and on like that. You know. And, you know, I know my mom worked for the government at one point when she lived in Washington. And you know, she said that back then, even then, you know, they had black folks that worked for she worked for the FBI, and she said that, you know, they had, that was integrated even before, you know, the rest of the country was integrated. And so they did work together, you know, and that might have helped take her away from the older ways of looking at things, you know. But I can remember my aunts and my grandmother, I mean, they were just, you know, super prejudiced, and I never really got it, you know. I never really understood why they felt the way they did. I didn't get that. So, but anyway, yeah, I mean, now, you know, folks intermarry and that kind of thing. And I guess there's still some people that have a problem with that, but it's just not, you know. I mean, they made a movie about that with Sidney Poitier and Spencer Tracy, you know, called, and also A Raisin in the Sun was another movie with Sidney Poitier, where a black family was going to move into a white neighborhood. And this was back in, I guess, the 60s when this film was made. And the whole thrust of the film was just how, you know, the folks in that neighborhood was trying to buy them out and all this, and trying to keep them out of the neighborhood. And I can remember seeing another movie with Sidney Poitier that was made in like the 90s, where he moved into a white neighborhood and nobody blinked. It was just, it wasn't even a plot in the film. It just, you know, that's just where he was living, you know, and nobody blinked, nobody cared. I mean, it was a non-issue. And if you look at films from in the 50s and the 60s, and you look at films in later time, you can see that that has just become, for I think most people, it's a non-issue. You know, I guess there are probably always going to be some people that they're going to, you know, not like that, you know, because their prejudice is just ingrained in them, I guess, you know. And they don't see people as individuals, they just see them as whatever ethnic group they happen to be a part of. And but I think overall society is moving away from that, which I think is a great thing. You know, I mean, in the 60s, you know, if a black couple tried to have dinner in a so-called white restaurant, it could have caused a stir, you know. Now, you don't even think about it, and you shouldn't. You know, it should be a non-issue. I always thought that that's just the stupid thing about prejudice and segregation and whatnot. It's like, you know, if you own a restaurant, why would you want to keep people out of it? If you make your living serving customers in a restaurant, the more the better. And would be the way I would look at it. So why does it make sense to turn people away? Because of their ethnic, you know, group or their race or whatever. I mean, how does that make sense? It's like, I'm not going to sell you this product because I don't like the color of your skin. I mean, it's stupidity. Yeah, I remember hearing about some of the civil rights activities that happened back in the 60s. I wasn't old enough to really be aware of it, but I remember hearing people talk about it. And, you know, my family, they were very much against that, you know, and but I didn't get to really see a whole lot of firsthand. You know, I got to experience integration firsthand. I mean, the transitional time, going from, say, an all-white school to fully integrated school. I got to experience that part of it. But in some of the more, the activist stuff, I was too young to really be too aware of that. But we all heard about it. I mean, they talked about it. And I can remember hearing about, they were talking about integrating the schools. From when I was, first, second, third grade, I can remember, people talking about that. And I know that they started the LCA over here, which is Jerry Falwell's school, Lynchburg Christian Academy. And that was at least in part, a reaction to integration. But that was a flat out all white school when it started. And I don't remember when they integrated that school, but I can remember hearing about it, and there were some folks that would send their kids there just for that reason, because they didn't want the kids going to an integrated school. So there's been some controversy as to whether or not that was the entire reason that school was started. I mean, the OU folks and Jerry Falwell himself would say that no, that wasn't why they started at school. But it's interesting that it started right around the same time integration was taking place in the public schools, and it wasn't all white. It was advertised that way. I mean, their literature and everything back when it first started, it was like, this is a Christian white school. So that was a selling point for them. But they got away from that. To their credit. It's a fully integrated school now, but I don't know at what point in their history they decided to make it an integrated school. But that was all part of that same time. Folks reacting to integration, wanting to keep things segregated. It's kind of like pushing against the tide. You can only push against it for so long, but I can remember some of that kind of stuff going on, but I'm happy to see that for the most part, we've gotten away from that. I mean, every once in a while, it's to the point now where if you hear somebody make a racist joke, I mean, you notice it, because you don't hear it all the time like you would have 20, 30 years ago. You heard that kind of thing all the time, and you never really thought about it, because it was part of the normal part of conversation. Whereas today, it's like if you hear somebody make a racist comment, it's like, what? Did I hear, what was that? I mean, it's like, wow, and it's just a sign of ignorance. If I hear somebody talk that way, I think this is an ignorant person, I mean, that's my reaction to, like this person, where's he been for the past 30 years? He's, and anyway, but, yeah, I guess, there is still, we're still somewhat segregated. We're not segregated as far as not being allowed to live where we want, or not being allowed to eat or do business where we want. I think that has gone away for the most part. I mean, if a black family wanted to move into this condominium community, You know, all the neighbors wouldn't get together and pass around a petition or something trying to keep them out. It just wouldn't happen. You know, we wouldn't all get together and try to buy the condo back from them just to keep them from moving in. That kind of thing, as far as I can see, that kind of thing has gone away. You know, the parks and whatnot are integrated. The pool is integrated. The schools are integrated. And I think that has gone a long ways towards integrating society. You know, I'm sure that there are places where it still happens. You know, maybe there are. I mean, there was a lawsuit a few years ago where I think it was a Waffle House somewhere didn't want to let some black customers in, and you know, they were obviously open because the place was full of people, and the blacks tried to come in and they told them the place was closed where the place was full of people, you know. You know, and they ended up like pulling the shades down, and you know, I saw it on the news where some of the white customers, and they were waving at them through the window, but you know, of course they got the pantsuit off, you know, and they should have, and but that's very much, I think, the exception these days. You know, once in a while you hear about something like that. And I think the reason we notice it when we hear about it is because it's so unusual, you know, because it's just not happening that way, you know, these days. I mean, if it is, it's you know, it's kept quiet, you know, because I haven't seen it, you know, and you know, I think that the solution is to continue. I think integrating the schools, because when we grow up together, we forget. In the sense, when I say we forget, is we don't see our friend who is black as a black person. We see them as our friend who happens to be black. You know, and I think that's where the solution is. You know, just to continue to work with all people, and it's true for gays and everybody else. You know, once you get to know them as individuals, you stop seeing them in the exclusively, you know, well, that's a gay person, or that's a black person, or whatever. You know, you stop thinking about them in that way. You just think of them as you get to know them as an individual, then you think of them as an individual. If they're a nice person, you know, or if there's somebody that you have a connection with, you know, if you're compatible, if you make a good friend, or if you share an interest, you know, if you're both into whatever, hunting, fishing, sports, politics, whatever, then you've got something you can build on. And I think that's where the solution lies. But I mean, there's still, you know, I guess it's come a long ways, but it still has a ways to go. But if you see, I don't know, you see integrated couples, and it's not, you know, if you saw something like that in the 60s, you know, I mean, it was a scandal. Now you don't even notice it. You know, you don't even think about it. I mean, maybe some people do still. Maybe, you know, I'm sure they do, but I think that's the exception. You know, I mean, it's just not a big deal. I remember when I had a cousin who was older than me, was getting married, and she worked with a black girl. And she invited that black girl to be one of her bridesmaids. And I remember the family was talking about it. I mean, they weren't mean about it or anything, but it was like, you know, I could tell they really didn't approve. But, you know, that's the solution. When you work with people and you go to school with people and you spend time with people, you become friends. And it's not about what their race is anymore. You know, I mean, it doesn't matter. You can still be friends with someone. I mean, I'm not saying that we totally forget our culture and all of that, you know, but it doesn't have to be something that divides us. You know, we can get past that. I mean, you know, you can be whatever you are. I mean, I have couples of friends of mine that are, you know, maybe they live a different lifestyle than I do, but hey, you know, I can appreciate it, and I enjoy diversity. You know, I wouldn't want to live in an all white world where everybody looks exactly like me. You know, I mean, that's not the kind of world I would want to live in. And it's absolutely wrong to hold people back and saying, because you're a woman, you can't be a doctor. I mean, that's the way things were at one time. You know, just because you're black, you can't, you know, you can't be mayor. I mean, we had a black mayor for a while in Lynchburg, you know. So, I mean, we got a black president now. I mean, it doesn't mean that racism has gone away, but we have come a long ways. I mean, you wouldn't have seen that in the '60s when I was growing up. It would have been laughable, you know. I mean, and you know, I don't guess prejudice will ever go away completely, but I think it's becoming, you know, it's becoming less and less accepted. I think it's so important, you know. I mean, I want to see the homosexuals be able to get married. I think that's an important right for them. It will make them a more accepted part of society. You know, and first of all, I think it's wrong to deny them that right. And secondly, I think when they have that right, they'll become less marginalized. I mean, sure, there's always going to be prejudice against them. That's never going to go away completely. But we can, you know, at least make it so that it's the exception instead of the rule.
Richard, where did you go to college?
Well, I didn't exactly go to college, but I did go to Chicago for a while and spent some time up there. But I think if I compare Chicago to Lynchburg, I think that Chicago is a much more segregated city. And I remember hearing an interview with Martin Luther King. And he said that, you know, he'd been into Alabama and all these places in the South, and he said that Chicago was the most prejudiced city he'd ever been in. And I can believe it, because they are really segregated up there. You have neighborhoods up there where they're like ethnic type neighborhoods, and you can live up there your entire life and never leave that neighborhood. I mean, it's like they're self-contained neighborhoods. You know, you've got their markets and everything that you need is right there in that neighborhood. They got their own bars, their own churches, their stores, their dry cleaners, and all of that. And you know, there's that city I mean, that's a mean city. I mean, I love Chicago and all of that, but I mean, you know, up there. Back, I was up there in the mid to late '70s, and the only people you could talk to up there were the hippies or the blacks. You know, I mean, you could strike up a conversation with the hippies or the blacks, and other than that, the people didn't want to talk to you. They didn't want to know you, and you really didn't want to. You had to be really careful up there. You know, who you talk to and whatnot. Because, I mean, they are just, it wasn't like here, you know. I mean, here, pretty much, if somebody's rude to you here, it's unusual. I mean, say what you want about the South. I mean, pretty friendly most of the time, and polite, you know. But up there, I mean, it's just the whole situation up there. You know, they've got gangs. The gangs are really bad in Chicago. You know, you've got a little bit of that here, and you've got a little bit of that everywhere. But not like up there where you can join a gang as a 12-year-old kid and be in your 50s and still be in the gang. You know, I mean, it's like you're still in this gang, this street gang that you've been in all your life, and it's a different kind of environment up there. But you know, you just here in this town, pretty much you can, you know, go anywhere and not have to worry about getting killed. You know, up there you gotta definitely pay attention to where you are and where you're going and who you're talking to and that kind of thing. And yeah, that definitely, you know, there are some folks, I guess, that just they don't want to branch out or whatever, you know. They just, it's like all the Catholics kind of live together, and, you know, and then you got to other neighborhoods, everybody's, you know, it's almost like a small town within a big city, you know. And that small town mentality, that is something that we do have here in Lynchburg, you know, because we were a small town, and we still have that mentality. You know, folks that were all born here and grew up here and have known each other all their lives. And I know folks that have come here from out of town, and they say that they always feel like an outsider, and that's not good. I'm real sorry that it is that way. You know, I'd like to think that we could get past that and not be that way, so that people wouldn't feel like they're an outsider just because they weren't born here or they didn't grow up here. And I don't know that you know, we'll ever get rid of that completely, you know, but it would be nice if we could.
You know, I went to University of Illinois in Chicago Circle, and I was there in the 70s, same time that maybe you were there, yes. Where were you?
North Carolina.
Oh, I see.
So where that is?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I lived in Evanston.
Okay.
And I also taught school, Orr High School.
You taught high school?
Yeah, in Orr High School, Pulaski. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, Chicago has a lot to recommend it. I mean, it's a great town for blues and baseball.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and there's a lot to do there. And they have a huge gay community there. You know, I mean, they were really open. That's something that you weren't seeing here at that time, but you saw it a lot up there.
Yes.
You know, but even then, you know, they all kind of clustered together. You know, maybe because they felt like they had to. But they all kind of like were certain neighborhoods that you would know would be, you know, there were a lot of gay people in this particular part of town or whatever. But even then, I mean, it was a lot more open up there. You know, people didn't try to hide it like I'm sure, you know, in the 70s here. I mean, if you were gay, you didn't talk about it, I'm sure. You know, I mean, it was just not accepted at all, and much more accepted up there. You know, people seem to be a lot more open about it up there. And that could be just because it's a big city, you know, and things are going to be a little different in a big city as opposed to a small town, you know.
Yes.
You know, and I don't know, growing up here, I mean, I can remember when blue laws were still enforced here, which are the Sunday closing laws. something else that was just considered a good thing, basically. I mean, sure. I mean, you could you could be open on Sunday, but you only had certain things you could sell.
Yeah.
And yeah, you could only sell necessities. You couldn't sell like so-called novelty or non-necessary items. And I can remember when the cops came in, the Kmart here in town tried being open on a Sunday for a while. And I remember hearing that my grandmother was in the store when it happened. The cops came in and closed the store because they weren't allowed to be open on Sunday. And I used to go visit my uncle who lived in Maryland. And the strange thing was, you'd go up there and all the stores are open on Sunday, but you walk in and 90% of the stores are roped off with chicken wire. Because even though they're open, they could only sell certain things. And so that was kind of funny. They say, all these stores are open on Sunday, how about that? And you walk in and everything's fenced off.
So when was that they couldn't sell? Do you know?
That was late 60s, I think late 60s.
Yes.
Late 60s, early 70s.
Oh.
But yeah, everything, like now they can't force you these days to not do business
Yes.
on Sunday, because that was just a religious thing, and the thing of it is, like in New York City, there's a large Jewish population in New York City, and for religious reasons they're not allowed to do business on Saturday because that's their Sabbath, and they weren't allowed to do business on Sunday because it was against the law. And so they were forced to, basically, that's Saturday and Sunday. And if you're running a store, that's when you're going to do the majority of your business. So it's a constitutional thing. Telling somebody, well, you can't do business on this particular day because, the majority of people are Christian, so therefore we're going to make the Christian Sabbath the official day that you can't do business, and you run into a problem with that. I mean, there are people. The guy that owns Chick-fil-A, the franchise. He's a Christian. That's fine. They're not open on Sunday. That's fine. That's not the government telling them they can't do it. It's their choice. The guy that owned Belk stores, same deal. He's a Christian. Doesn't want to do business on Sunday. All his stores are closed on Sunday. Don't have a problem with that. That's fine. What I would have a problem with was telling him that he couldn't do business on Sunday. It should be up to the individual. We're a predominantly Christian society, especially then. Even now, somewhat, but especially then. I mean, in this town, we're predominantly Protestant. We had some Jewish people. We had a few Catholics and whatnot, Seventh-day Adventists and people like that. But we're predominantly a Protestant group, Protestant society. And my understanding was that it was just that the reason they picked that day in particular was because it's the Christian Sabbath. It's not the actual Sabbath, because that would be Saturday. But it's the day that was adopted by the Christian Church as their Sabbath, because that's the day that Jesus supposedly rose from the dead, the first day of the week, Sunday. Mm-hmm. And so they had written that in the law, saying that you couldn't do certain types of business
Yes.
on Sunday. You could sell a hat on Sunday because it was considered a necessity. But if the hat had a name on it, like a baseball team name or something like that, you couldn't sell the hat because then it's considered a novelty.
Yeah.
You see, so yeah, and so yeah.
Richard, you're from Texas?
I was born in Abilene, but we moved here when I was about 2.
Okay.
So I've really never known any other place as far as, I didn't like spend part of my childhood in other places. We moved from Texas to Delaware, and then we moved here. But this is the only place I ever remember living.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
But your family are from Texas?
No. My father was in the Air Force, and that's why we happened to be in Texas when I was born. But my mother's family is from here. And my grandmother, grandparents, and aunts, and uncles, and cousins, and everybody, they were all from this area.
Mm-hmm.
And my father's people were from Charleston, South Carolina. The interesting thing about that, as regards to prejudice and segregation and whatnot, my father was not prejudiced, and I think that the reason he wasn't is he grew up very poor, and he grew up in the so-called ghetto, very poor, and he grew up with black people, because they all lived in the ghetto together. They were all from that really poor part of town. So segregation breeds prejudice. My father grew up around blacks because he was poor, and they were poor too, because they weren't allowed to do a lot. If you were a black teacher back then, you really accomplished something, because they would work very hard to keep you down, keep you in your place, so called. And if you became a doctor or something like that, you really had to work hard to overcome a lot, And but most of those folks they didn't have anything, and their standard of living was very low, and they were living in the ghetto. And then you had some white people that were poor for whatever reason, and they would grow up right along with them, and so I think that's how my father escaped the taint of prejudice.
Richard, do you want to talk about a little about the religious aspect of this town and liberty and all of that?
Yeah, we are predominantly Protestant, evangelical, fundamentalist Christian. We have been, my grandmother and my family, they all grew up over there in Fairview Heights, where the Falwell's folks are from, and they all knew each other. They knew, Jerry Falwell's father was the big bootlegger and all that. Well, they all knew it. They knew him and everything. They all kind of grew up together, and it was. There wasn't a lot of liberal thinking people around back then. I guess there were some, but it was predominantly very conservative thinking people in their religion as well as their politics. It was all one thing back then. You didn't really think of it in terms of, this is political and this is religious. Folks who were Christian and thought that it was a sin to work on Sunday thought that the blue laws were a good thing, a moral thing. They would have thought that it was immoral to work on Sunday. You didn't go out and mow your lawn on Sunday. if you were driving to church and you saw somebody out mowing their grass on a Sunday morning, you had a low opinion of that person. That was just the way people thought, you know. And you know, we're still pretty conservative, but it's not so much now as it was. You know, and with liberty and all of that. I mean, I remember when the college started, because I was living over there in Rivermont, and it was called LBC back then. It was Lynchburg Baptist College in the beginning. Then they changed it to Liberty Baptist College, and eventually to Liberty University. But I can remember when that school started, you could look at somebody and tell they were a Liberty student. I mean, because they all dressed a certain way. They all had really short hair during a time when most people had long hair, because we're talking early 70s, you know. And I mean, they were friendly enough, I guess, but you could just, you know, it was almost like talking to a Moonie or something. I mean, they just had that space cadet thing going, you know. I mean, they seemed kind of out of touch with society at large, and that was encouraged over there for a long time. And they were discouraged from associating with anybody, even other Christians. I mean, they didn't want to associate with Catholics or Presbyterians, Methodists, Lutherans, or any other Christian denomination. I mean, they were very strongly separatist in their attitudes. It's not so much these days. I mean, they're more mainstream now than they were then, which I think is a good thing. But it was kind of frustrating in a way, because their whole attitude was, you know, we're the thing, you know, we're it, and everybody else is kind of subpar. So that was their, you know, even other Christians were subpar, and that was their attitude, you know. But I don't see it now nearly as much. They seem to, most of the kids over there, I mean, they're still fundamentalist Christian, and if you talk to them, they still believe that, but, you know, they're not living in a world unto themselves. I mean, they can talk sports, they can talk TV, they can talk politics. I mean, most of them are conservative, but, you know, they're not like it was at one point, where they were sort of in their own world. The folks at Liberty, I think what they have done over the years is they followed Jerry Falwell's lead. And, you know, Jerry Falwell started off as very strongly in favor of segregation. And I think that his followers, his parishioners, and his students, they followed his lead. When he was non-political, they were non-political. He got very political in the 80s. He was at his most political, and his students and his parishioners have one of the things that bothered me about the folks over there, and I've worked with a lot of them, and I'm talking about church members as well as students. You know, they really don't think outside the box. Like, it's Dr. Falwell's opinions are their opinions, and they don't really think beyond that. And it has gotten I think it's getting a little better now, but it's still pretty political. In that, to the point where if I were a church member, I would be uncomfortable being in a church that was that strongly associated with a political party. Because, you know, what if you are a Christian believer, but you happen to be pro-choice? And you're part of a church that is just, you know, actively, we're talking actively, because there are political activists, and Falwell was a huge political activist. And where's your place in that church, in that congregation? If you hold a political opinion that's different, you know, and you would probably feel like, well, I can't be here anymore. I mean, I got to go somewhere else, and I think that's unfortunate. But I see it moving, in a good direction with the new folks that are running the place now. I mean, the kids, Jonathan and Jerry Jr. I think they're taking it in a good direction. And it's still not there yet. It's got a long way to go. Maybe it'll never get there all the way. But Jerry Falwell Sr., he was such a polarizing figure. And I'm hoping that they're moving in a different direction from that. I mean, I'd like to see it where it becomes less political and less identified with a political party. And not so much non-political, but to be so Republican. It's almost like we're Christian and we're Republican. It's like they go hand in hand. Like you couldn't be a Democrat and be Christian.
Richard, what do you think about the world situation right now?
The world situation?
Yeah.
Well, I have a lot of anxiety about global warming. I think that we may be polluting ourselves out of existence. That's a major concern for me. And there are folks that want to politicize that too. And I think we'll debate it and debate it and debate it until there's nobody left to debate. So that's a huge concern. I think that I like President Obama a lot. I think he's a very smart guy. He's been handed a rough situation to deal with. But he's a smart guy and he's willing to get stuff done. Who knows what's going to happen? I mean, in the future, but I think the world is changing, and some of it for the better, some of it not. The different technologies that we have now are amazing, in medical science and medical breakthroughs and all of that, pretty amazing. But the earth is not healthy. And we as a species, I think, right now are not healthy. And I don't know if we'll adapt, if our species will adapt to, climate changes and whatnot, or what's going to happen with that, or whether we'll turn around and decide that, we don't want to be unhealthy anymore, and we're gonna do what it takes to change it. Eat better, exercise more, that kind of thing. So we're always changing, and my biggest concern of all, I think, is if we pollute our planet. I mean, this is where we live, and if the planet goes, everything goes. And all the politics and all the things that we talk about and we care about and that are important, they're not as important as, it's like if you have an illness in your body, that becomes the most important thing. You want to take care of that, because if your body goes, you go. I mean, that's it. And all these other things won't matter anymore. And I kind of feel like that's where we are with the planet, you know, that all these things that are important and we should talk about and care about and work on, you know, they're not going to really mean very much if we're not around, you know, if we die off, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Or, you know.
You know, Richard, why aren't we talking about it?
Well, we talk about it, but it's like everything else, it's politicized, you know. I think that most people are smart enough to know that the planet is getting warmer. There's some controversy as to why the planet is getting warmer, whether it's natural or whether it's being caused by all the pollution that we're putting out. You know, it's almost, you know, I mean, you know, the point is, if the Earth becomes inhabitable, it's not going to really matter why it became inhabitable. The only thing is, are there things that we can do now to forestall that from happening? You know, are there changes that we can make? I think that there are. I don't think we're at the point where we're ready to do that. You know, because we don't want to give up, you know, our way of life or whatever. You know, and it's happening so gradually that it's not like, we're not going to burn up tomorrow. Or we're not going to burn up 10 years from now, you know. So we don't really have to worry about that yet. And I think that is the mentality that a lot of people have, you know. But it's coming, and I don't know, the state of the world is, it's not what I would like it to be. I mean, we've made some progress. You know, like I was saying, in the 60s, when a black person couldn't walk into a lunch counter, you know, I mean, we've made some progress with that. I'd like to see us continue to make progress with all the different folks that you know, that we live with and work with and get to know. You know, so I'm somewhat encouraged about that. You know, it's kind of scary. I mean, Islam, radical Islam, and all, and that kind of thing. It's just, you know, that's a scary thing, because, you know, if your God tells you to go and kill somebody, you know, I mean, you feel like you're doing God's work, and that's a scary thing. And we've seen that in our history too, with the Salem witch trials and all of that. I mean, you could be tortured and executed for practicing witchcraft. I mean, legally, you know. I mean, that was a religious thing, you know. You look at our history and the history of the world, it makes you appreciate the separation of church and state and how necessary it is. Because otherwise you're going to have that kind of thing, you know, religious persecution and whatnot. And so it's quite scary. But, you know, I feel like, you know, we made some progress. We still got a long way to go. You know, I think that we got to start paying attention to climate change. I mean, we've got to, because if we don't, we're going to die. And our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, I mean, where are they going to live? You know? I mean, we're seeing evidence of it every day. You know? And so we're just going to not do anything until it's too late. If we're that stupid, you know, if we're that stupid as a species, guess what? That's what we'll get. You know?
Are you hopeful or not?
I'm hopeful about some things and not hopeful about others. You know? I do see us moving in the direction of more acceptance of, you know, I think that, you know, I like living in a society that's not as prejudiced as it was 30 years ago. And then, so I'm hopeful in that regard. It's nice that, you know, the technologies that we have make our lives better somewhat. You know, I mean, it's nice that we have computers that can do all these things. A lot of this stuff it's changing every day. It's getting more and more, you know, advanced all the time. It's incredible. I'm not real hopeful as far as, you know, religious wars and that kind of thing. I don't see that getting better anytime soon. I'm not hopeful as far as global warming. You know, I think it's going to have to get a lot worse before people take it seriously. And I'm hoping that we're not going to wait to the point where we're you know, past the point of return, you know. Like, okay, we need to turn things around. It's like if you have cancer or something, you can't wait until your body is ate up with it and then decide to do something about it.
Yes, Richard, the tape is finishing, so you want to say goodbye to the audience?
Goodbye, audience. It's been a pleasure. Good luck to us all.
I have a question. Now, in regards to the civil rights era, not civil rights era, but the Civil War and the period when there was an attempt to come to terms with slavery in America, we were talking the other day about the question of whether the Civil War was caused by slavery or trade conflict or what they call states' rights, or, you know, an issue of the power of the federal government over the state government. And I was investigating some of that, and I understand that if you read the actual documents, like the Declaration of War, the main cause was slavery, that the southern states specifically were concerned about the trend of abolition throughout the northern states, and they wanted to prevent that from impacting on their way of life. They didn't want slavery abolished in their states. And moreover, as we had been discussing about colonialism, how the European states, the question was, why weren't the European states, why didn't they form a union like the American states, the United States? And I said part of it is they could never come to terms with their colonies. There were conflicts over their access to resources in colonies, and they didn't want to negotiate the competition in that domain. If they had had a union, the union would have had to resolve the competition in the foreign colonies, and that was, they would rather just allow the competition to run rampant, and in any case they generally weren't, via this competition, they weren't the primary ones to lose in these areas. The states weren't the primary ones. It was the colonies that lost. That's where all the minerals and so on were extracted from, and all the goods were extracted from. So they couldn't come to terms, they couldn't have a union because of the conflict over these colonies. They didn't want to resolve those problems. And so a similar thing happened in the United States, where the conflict over the modes of commerce, the way the economy was run, became a big issue in the new states, the states that were being brought into the Union. So the South wanted a way to continue to grow. They wanted the powerful who owned the plantations and so forth, wanted the ability to enhance their, continue their aggrandizement. And so they needed land, and they needed that the new states allow slavery, because that was their mode of being. And the northern sentiment was against slavery, and they didn't want slavery to continue in these states, or they didn't want to extend slavery into these states. So this large conflict arose again over the, quote, colonies, the new states that were being founded. So this, the conflict of these ways of life, the economic modes of life, erupted into the Civil War. And the South wanted to secede. They wanted to, they saw a union being inimical to their way of life. They saw that a union would bring about an equality and abolition. And so they wanted to escape the union. They wanted to escape the power of the central state and codify their mode of life, codify their slavery, and then compete for these foreign territories. They allow the foreign territories to choose, essentially, supposedly to choose which side they lay on, whereas the Union would have forced the abolition, the rule of law would have forced the freeing of the slaves and the abolition process to continue. So the Civil War happened, and the South lost, and the Reconstruction, the period after that, and trying to reformulate the South as a non-slave country failed. That they weren't able to adjust to, I guess, a industrial economy, or to make the slave states profitable. The whole hierarchy was disrupted by this process, by the slave ownership, and what I was saying earlier, that part of what happened in this process was the northern banks came in and started to control the farming territory, and started to become the power in dictating how farms were run and what terms were used, whose terms were adhered to, what the rule was, who ruled in this in the South, and they started to implement a draconian draconian profit orientation, so much so that a lot of the landowners, the small farming operations weren't able to survive in that bank-oriented system, and so the banks would acquire the land. So these people had suffered through the South had suffered through this war, and to some extent I guess the property rights were retained and so forth, but the North came down, and the carpetbaggers and so forth, and started to a sort of economic warfare occurred after the Civil War, and so these banks, and represented by northern capital, or representing northern capitalists and so forth, started to acquire a lot of this property that was in Southern hands. So supposedly on the surface of it, you have this North, which is bringing down this just equal society and allowing the blacks to be full citizens and compete on equal footing, when the North was abusing this and bringing down the capitalist way of life into the South and acquiring land and growing in its power, growing in a capitalist, the bank-oriented societal economic formation. So again, you have on the face of it is some kind of equality being advanced. It's an economic colonization. They front that they're civilizing the country, that they're bringing a sort of democracy, an anti-hierarchy to the South, but in the meantime, they're acquiring the property and they're setting the rules from the financial hierarchy. So this is, I was saying this is a pattern that continues to this day. You send the country in supposedly liberating. The aggressor is supposedly liberating the country because of its backward ways, because of its bad social relationships, because of its anti-democratic stance, because of its monarchy or its aristocratic domination and so forth. But what is brought in is just another form of domination. So this failed eventually. The Reconstruction process didn't bring about a equitable social order, and I'm not real clear on the exact sequence, and I'm sure there was probably some depressions or large-scale economic failures that brought about a turn away from this hope that they would be able to re-architect the South to be like the North. And in the 1890s, supposedly from the 1890s to the 1940s, a period arose where the sort of slavery was reinstituted, but in a different form, reconstituted, so that a lot of blacks, or many impoverished blacks and so forth, still were essentially propertyless and no security, no secure work, and so forth. These people were migrants and people destitute on the road, and the South constructed a system where a lot of these people were re-enslaved is not the right word, but they were the people who were not able to have a functioning business of their own or weren't employed properly. Well, they'd be taken and put into prison camps and then put to work in the prison camp. So the prison camp became a new form of slavery, where they were without their freedom again. They were employed at very beneficial terms to the slave camp operator, which I'm not clear on whether that was frequently the state or whether, I'm sure there are private concerns in running these camps as well. And a whole segregation arose again, where the blacks were demeaned and employed to the to the benefit of the white upper class, or right, with the white dominant class. So it wasn't until the the World War II, we had depression in World War II, that the blacks finally, and this was in concordance with many other events, but now that the U.S. is on top of the world after World War II, and the blacks finally organized to break out of the discrimination and the segregation that had been applied to them for this period of 1890 to 1940. So I mean, I guess I could go into some of the moral order and the justification via the Bible and the discrimination applied, and how that was not enslaved, how that was deployed to enforce this order. The use of the racial inferiority to mask an economic order by which the power structure was maintained. A great part of the capitalist system is the mystification of the ways that capital operates, the power relationships. It's taken to be, it's portrayed as if it's a special knowledge of how to make money, how to cut deals, how the banking system operates. It's elevated to a sort of a moral category, as if there are only certain people who are able to handle and comprehend how to organize this system and how it operates and so forth. And therefore it's only to be held by a specialized class of people. Only they are capable of dealing with this knowledge. And of course, there has to be some justification for, it's not, the painting of this knowledge is not completely predatory, but that it's also beneficial for society in general. So you have to create this story about why, you have to mystify, and you also have to have a justification for why this order is beneficial for the people who you are imposing it on. To justify, the powerful have to hold it back, have to hold the knowledge back so that it's not understood by others. And they have to give a reason why they are why they are keeping the knowledge themselves, why they are privy to this knowledge, keeping this private among themselves, and why that is not a means of, why they're not simply exploiting. It has to be rectified with their belief that they are doing the best possible, bringing the best possible choice to the people subject to the order, the economic order. So it wasn't, this this, obviously, I mean, bringing all these people out of a physical slavery, bringing black people out of a physical slavery, and the terror that was practiced on them, and the physical threat, and the whole social structure that was put in place. I mean, both, the people who were the highest of people who were cognizant of the options of, these people have to be suppressed, otherwise we won't be able to maintain our control of the lower classes in general. We won't be able to maintain our profits and the hereditary dominance that those people were supporting the structure, but there was also an enormous number of people who were not fully cognizant of the choices. They didn't know why these things were being done. They just bought the myths, which were that black people were inferior or natively inferior, couldn't be brought up to live like white people. And I mean, obviously there are people have differences and cultures have differences, and there are ways of looking at life that are inherent, and it's not as if this is all fabricated or constructed, like these differences are just imposed upon the people. There are differences between the cultures, and then these differences are used as justifications for maintaining this power structure. So there were many people who just took it on faith that blacks and whites were genetically, there was a genetic hierarchy, and blacks were not capable of doing things whites were, and there were there was a tension between the races, or specifically the whites were imposing upon the blacks this a derogated status, so that they could they absorbed this. This was just, it became not a justification for them. It was a truth for them. So you had black people living in this terrible environment where many people didn't understand the source of these constructed divisions, and they were unable to deal with. They aren't able to address the trade-offs. They aren't able to look at the possibilities of bringing equality and what it would mean for the society in general to not hold racial hatreds or racial discrimination, not be so attached to these ways of conceiving society. They were just enmeshed in it and unable to break away from that social architecture. Looking at saying, can this thing continue? No, it's unsustainable. The whole population bloom and so forth on the basis of oil resources and natural resources is unsustainable. So I think that initially, these discoveries of oil and energy resources and atomic energy to an extent and so forth, were boons, were benefits, were seeing opened up great possibilities. So even though they caused tremendous warfare, there was all this competition over who would get access to this, what power structure would have access to these resources, and that caused carnage, great carnage. But it enabled a higher standard of living for a huge number of people. It enabled great scientific discoveries. Enabled a better welfare for the population, a more enlightened, it could have enabled a more enlightened population. All the access to education and books and communication, so forth, could have been generated a much more aware society, and that aspect has been wasted, has been I lost the word, has been missed. So you develop this consumer-based society in which everything grew to be about making profit for everyone, not making profit for the creators and so forth, and not so much of the actual social profit, the social benefit of these ventures, but became more about how to addict people to consumption in order to benefit the producer. So that was a travesty. That was a huge waste of the potential benefits of these discoveries and these resources. And so now, so that was a sort of crime. You had these benefits, the benefits I've listed, but you also had the carnage of warfare. You had the waste of the opportunity, the lost opportunities for benefiting people in general, society in general. So those sort of crimes continued through the whole development, from the very beginning of the discovery of oil, and I'm sure this happened before. Those exploitations were costs that seriously damaged its value. Now, though, as you get further on in this process, you start to lose the opportunities. You have the costs, you have the wars, you have the disinformation, the lying, the complete consumerization and entertainment aspect of manipulating populations, but you also have the loss of future. Where is the growth going to come from in the future? Where are, now they're cutting the health benefits. The U.S. is in decline in standing, in income, in education, in inequity, the social or financial or income and wealth inequities, health inequities, and the course seems to be to drive this to even worse inequality. So the advantages now are disappearing. The benefits of this resource exploitation are disappearing. So I'd say from that standpoint, it's gotten worse. It should have been managed better from the start. The whole competitive nature of, if saying, well, if I don't exploit this, then somebody else will, so I must exploit this. We must go all out towards being the exploiters, because we need to beat out the competitive aspect. We need to beat out these other people, because if they had the opportunity, they'd do it to us, so we have to do it to them. That logic has led to, has many ramifications, but has led to just this all-out competition for these resources and a wasting, exhaustion of the resources. And some people, the scientists, for a while when I was growing up, there was the belief that there was always the next discovery, the next opportunity. Fusion energy would come along, and then we would have a bounty which wouldn't be tapped for, in the sense wouldn't be exhausted for millennia. But it never came to be. At some point, this belief of the forever future, belief in the forever future, fails, and so that's basically, it's failed now. This continual returns, continual illustrious growth the faith in that has died.
I'm so interested in what you said in the beginning of this video, that if you ask whether we are getting better or not, or getting worse, it depends what collective you ask this question from, and what groups. So that if you ask one group, they may say, well, we are improving, because they are the people who are benefiting. And you ask another group, and they say, my God, things are getting really bad, because they're losing. And so the question would be, how do we do things? What is the just way of doing things? And this just way then would be the criteria upon which we would say we are improving or we are getting worse. And what is that just way? You see what I mean? And so as you were talking, I was thinking about what you said. And like for example, right now, the Muslims are really being abused, and they're losing, their resources, their lives, for nothing, And while these other groups are benefiting, So it all depends who you ask, but overall, there has to be a matrix, a criteria upon which humanity can say we are improving or we are going back. And that criteria, it's important to determine what it is and understand it very well, so that every action that we make or our politicians make is made upon that criteria, you know. Anyway, I just wanted to say that.
Well, I mean, I think that I mean, my impression is I hope, and maybe this is just part of my upbringing, or maybe it's an aesthetic that is, I assume this to be natural when it's really inculcated, which is to think that people understand limits to greed naturally. They know when they're satisfied, and they're willing to forego further accumulation, aggrandizement for the benefit of someone else. They don't want to possess all the territories. They can live happily on the fruits of the area in which they're living, and they are willing to give to others, or allow others their own fruits. They don't want to take everyone else's fruits to the maximum capability they have. In other words, they don't want to use the resources they have to then go out and take other people's resources, in order that they can be even more in control of all the resources. I don't think naturally the majority of people are built that way. They prefer to have a level of satisfaction that they don't need to control everything in order to guarantee that level of satisfaction. That is a consequence of the hierarchy. That is the order of the powerful. That is the imposition of the needs of domination on people in general. And so, if to bring it to oil and the Middle East, these people would be, if it were up to like a collective or social state that operated according to this principle of satisfaction, they would recognize, they would understand the consequences of this extraction of resource to people in the Middle East, and would be able to forego their own, they would be able to make choices which weren't solely based on their own benefit, so that the people in the Middle East would be able to benefit off of, quote, their oil. So obviously, if it's oil on their land, you'd have to make an argument why we getting their oil bring benefits to them. If they just sat on their oil and were able to acquire the technique in order to extract it, then they would be able to benefit from it. But we provide them some means of, some component of the means of extracting that oil in order, and so that they can benefit from it, from that extraction as well. So you'd have a basis there for people here benefiting and people there benefiting, and then you'd have people here adjudicating, deciding, well, how much of our consumption do we really need, and how much of that is actually benefiting them. You wouldn't be trying to control these people. You'd be trying to find a means of satisfying their welfare and also, I mean, to an extent, their rights too, because it is the oil under their quote their land. I mean, we had oil under quote our land, you know, whatever that means. But you'd be interested in limiting your own consumption for their benefit. You wouldn't be interested in solely in your consumption, which allows your hierarchy and power structure to exercise control over over that population in order to just benefit your selfish needs. That whole architecture of greed and selfishness would be deposed, and so you wouldn't have this ridiculous. And really, I mean, stepping back, this architecture of why you would choose to exploit limited resources. Yeah, anybody discovering something like oil, immediately you would realize that, you know, this isn't manna. You know, this isn't something that just grows out of nowhere. It's continually replenishing. I mean, the default assumption would be that this is a limited resource, and so from that you should immediately realize that, hey, this thing is very useful, but it's, you know, it comes to an end. So we want to use it wisely. We want to use it judiciously, but the hierarchy rides waves of growth. The people who are powerful maintain their power by riding on top the growth, and so it's in their interest to maximize the exploitation of this resource. Instead of saying we want to, the population in general, you know, we're relatively happy with where we are. We can improve our station by using some of those resources. We don't want to use it to the exclusion of someone else, or we don't want to use it so wastefully that later we'll lose the benefit of it, or we'll use it in some ridiculous manner now, when later it'll become dear to us. The benefits that we could have had are out of our reach at that point. So there'd be a much more judicious, it'd still be exploitation of the resource if it weren't organized by the hierarchy, by the growth riders. They're the ones who benefit the most from using it quickly, and are able to hop from one growth market to the next. And so those sitting at the top use these phases of growth that are in various places, since they can transport, since they can go over to the next one or connect to the next one, that it's in their interest to they don't have any concerns, or they don't suffer the consequences of as much of the exhaustion of these various growth stages. So, I mean, going back to World War I, World War II, the idea that you have this progression of the Western, the capitalism, and I'm not going to be able to list it properly, but through the European states, from Italy to France to Holland to England, to Spain. I forgot Spain, to Great Britain, and then to the U.S. I mean, you just get this constant elevation of an empire and then decline, and then the progression to the next empire, and you get all these boom-bust cycles and blooms that are that lead to these these contests and these wars and the wars of succession and that from a collective understanding and from a collective sympathy would not be supported. It's these booms and busts that are beneficial to the hierarchies and the competition at the level among these successors and so forth that cause these tremendous conflagrations and theft of resources and all the tremendous fear and mind-numbing. I mean, just think since September 11th, which I believe has been exploited, and probably, I mean, it's very dubious the way that the way these towers fell and the way, I mean, obviously one of the buildings was demolished. That this crisis, this catastrophe, has benefited an order which has numbed the population. You know, people aren't able to deal with these issues of the domination of, say, the Middle East. You know, all the stuff that's happened in to Iran, to Iraq. You know, they had to create a story why it was justified, why the tremendous pressure in the Middle East it has been applied in the Middle East, why the resources have been extracted, why the devastation has been wreaked, why the resources have been appropriated, and sort of why all the tremendous anxiety. I mean, unbelievable. I mean, can you imagine living in Iran when they constantly threaten these people with attack? For years this has been going on, and now it's gotten, even since 9/11, has just gotten deafening. The amount of energy these people put into justifying the need to crucify Iran. Just the tremendous mental punishment that's rained down upon people daily to justify this system. It is criminal. It is absolutely, anti-humanistic. It's genocidal, and it is, to people's minds what it does to the potential, what people can be. It's an abomination. Whatever.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, when I went to Iran last summer, no, the summer before that, in middle of the uprising and election and green movement and all that, I met a lot of Iranians who said, when you go back to the United States, please tell Americans they can have our oil. But to please, let us have our souls. Don't abuse us this way so that you can come and take our money and oil. You can have our money and oil. We give it to you. We are hospitable people who care more about our spiritual side than the materialistic. side of our lives. And so come and take, but let us have our spirituality, let us have our souls, let us have our dignity. Don't do this to us. And when I came back and told some Americans, they looked at me and just stared in my face. And didn't say a word, you know. It was like they felt guilty deep inside to be a part of this theft and abuse that has been going on the planet, you know. So they don't really want to talk about it because they feel guilty.
You're not saying that the majority of people responded in that way?
No, but a lot of people respond in a way that they really don't say much, you know what I'm saying? Because they don't want to address this issue. They don't want to remember. Because also for them it's painful. Because, you know, what can they do? You know what I mean? They sort of know it, that this is what's going on, but they feel helpless, you know, they can't go against the system. And as they say, well, what can we do? But at the same time, you know, they feel a bit of guilt, you know, to be part of such a system. For their country to go and abuse people all over the world this way, you know. That is probably not a good feeling to have. And so they really don't want to address it, you know. They just say, well, what can I do about it? And they just sit there and observe the whole thing. But it does affect them, you know.